Hi, I'm Phil Bell, Group Editor of Classic Cars. This is Richard Gooding, Production Editor, and Sam Dawson, Content Editor. So thanks for sending in all your questions, some really good ones in there, and we'll have a go at answering them for you. So over to Richard, which is the first question?
Okay, question 1 is from Ronald. Which car did you unexpectedly enjoy driving or were embarrassed to say you liked?
That would have to be one Christmas I was visiting family in Menorca, and a family member lent me her Renault 4. And it was one of those thanks moments, because I love high performance cars, agile sports cars. But you know what? Half an hour on those country lanes and narrow streets, I just fell in love with its roly-poly handling, its gutsy little 4-cylinder engine, even that strange gear shift coming out the dashboard. And no, I'm not embarrassed to admit it. Sam.
A few years ago, I drove an Alfa Romeo Arna, which is a regular fixture in those kind of crap cars books and lists of terrible cars. And it's often just accused of being a Datsun Cherry with an Alfa engine, and it's supposedly the worst of all worlds. It's unreliable, it's ugly, etc. But when you look at the history of the car, arguably it saved Alfa Romeo. It proved that you could Alpha-ize another platform. It broke new marketing ground. And here's the thing, it's great to drive. It's essentially an Alfa Sud, but lighter and more aerodynamic with independent rear suspension. And it drives as you'd imagine. And when you go back to the original press response to the car, they loved it. It's only in retrospect that people have decided to hate it. So Alfa Romeo Arna. And I'm still embarrassed to admit that because I own an Alfa Romeo and I'm part of the club.
Thank you, Sam. What's next, Rich?
Okay, question 2, also from Ronald. Which car was the biggest letdown when you finally got to drive one? Shall we start with Sam this time?
Phil's going to hate me for saying this because he used to own one. The air-cooled Porsche 911. For a car that's lauded by enthusiasts, it strikes me it took them ages to get it right. I'm with Derek Bell in that the engine is in the wrong place. I mean, why else would have people not copied it if it's such a good idea? The only other firm I can think of that made a success of it was Alpine, and even then, not to the same extent as Porsche. But the gear change is horrendous. The driving position isn't very good. The windscreen is a strange angle, and I don't even think the car looks very good. So I can't help but think sometimes when people wax lyrical about the 911, it's because they want to like it rather than they actually taken it to their hearts. Because, to be honest, and I say this as a huge Porsche fan, the transaxle platform 928, 924, 944, 968 is measurably superior. The 968 Club Sport is probably my favorite Porsche of all time. It's probably in my top 10. But the air-cooled 911, to me, I'm afraid it's a dud.
Controversial.
We'll talk about that later. Okay, my sort of disappointment was I finally got to drive a 1968 Mustang Fastback 390 GT in Highland Green. I've been a fan of the Bullitt movie since I was allowed to stay up late in the 70s and watch it on black and white TV. And so when I finally got to drive a replica of that car around the streets of San Francisco, you couldn't imagine how excited I was. But unfortunately, the car looked great, sounded great, but dynamically not all that special, not even particularly fast. But despite that, you know what? I'd still have one. Richard, have you got one?
Yes, mine would be a replica of an AC Cobra 427, although it's probably more me than the car. It was on a Classic Car Experience Day, and not being blessed with height, I couldn't really reach the clutch pedal very easily. So driving through Kidderminster rush hour traffic, every time we stopped, the car stalled. We had to keep pulling over, going into a garage, and it was just miserable. And it should have been a really enjoyable experience, but for me, it just wasn't.
So what's next on the list of questions?
This one is from Dave. In the future, you will only have access to an electric vehicle. You can have one last drive in a classic of your choice. You have 1 day and 1 tank full of petrol. After that, you can never drive another classic. What car would you choose? Where would you go, and why?
Okay, now I've come to terms with that terrible scenario of not being able to drive another classic. It would have to be Pacific Coast Highway heading north from San Francisco, one of the most endlessly sinuous stretches of tarmac I've driven. And it would have to be in a Ferrari 250 GTO, a car that's got all the tactility, the beauty, the visceral thrills to really make the best of a road like that.
Yeah, what a slightly downhearted scenario, but it does bring it into perspective, doesn't it? It makes you think, what do I really love about cars? And for me, it would be a Lancia Stratos in Group 4 trim on the roads of the Targa Florio in Sicily. I've never actually driven those roads, and yet, to me, the Stratos is this unbeatable meeting point of high design, beautiful driving style, gorgeous engine, and impeccable competition pedigree. And to drive it on those roads, to really challenge myself and to drive it flat out with that V6 howling behind me and those roads just snaking ahead of me, presumably crowds of Italians cheering me on from ramparts and things like that, would just be perfect. And I think I could sort of hand in my keys happy after that.
Okay. I think mine would be on a similar kind of era, similar kind of situation. I think it would be a Renault 5 Turbo on the Monte Carlo rally route, I think. Again, I've never driven those roads, but the fact the car looks so great, and it's from the era of, when turbos were just starting. Okay, so moving on, Robert says, what are the practicalities of running, for example, a late Series 1 Rolls-Royce Shadow as a daily driver, assuming petrol costs were not an issue?
Okay, clearly the Silver Shadow offers a tremendous amount of style, luxury, and feel-good factor for what they cost to buy now. But it's really important to think of the income level it would have taken to buy that car new or to buy an equivalent now, and then let's say double it, because these cars are now 50, 60 years old. And if you buy a good one and you keep it looked after by an expert specialist, it should be a pretty dependable thing, but you've got to allow for those ongoing maintenance costs. And just to kind of illustrate the point, someone I know paid about £20,000 for a very nice car, looked after it well. Within 3 years, he spent another £20,000 keeping on top of it. And this was not a bad car to begin with. So it's entirely doable, but you've just got to compare it to the right level of car. What do you think, Sam?
I'd agree. I recently spoke to one of the country's leading Silver Shadow specialists, and he said that also one of the key things to remember with a Shadow is to keep it exercised. It's like any other classic car. If you leave it alone, things seize up, and the things that seize up on the Shadow, especially the hydraulic systems, incredibly expensive to repair. And so you've got to be, I suppose, to use it as a daily, that does help, but you've got to be committed in a way. Also, from another angle, can you carry off shabby chic? Because if you do use one every day, then the beautiful walnut dashboard and leather seats and Connolly hide and carpet, things like that, they're going to get very worn. And, it's difficult to keep that sort of thing in a decent condition. So, do you want it looking mint, or are you going to allow the ravages of daily use to take it to perhaps a different place than most people would consider a Rolls-Royce residing?
But you'd follow some great luminaries, owner-wise. Tom Jones, Elton John, Jimmy Tarbuck.
Yeah.
Alice Cooper.
Alice Cooper.
Were their cars knackered?
Probably not.
Okay, here's an interesting one. This is from Simon. Which new cars available for under £100,000 will achieve classic status and probably not depreciate?
Okay, that's a tough one, because many of the kind of go-to kind of collector level cars tend to come in at well over £100,000 now. You know, 911 GTRS Porsches and so on. But if you look at the next layer down, cars like Porsche Cayman GTS manual, BMW M2, maybe an Alpine A110, the kind of cars that people are passionate about from when they're launched, and there's a real buzz around the media associated with them. I wouldn't say any of them won't depreciate, but they're likely to depreciate most slowly and then pick up again. And even some of the EVs, if you look at the new Renault 5, that car's created an instant buzz, and it's almost an instant classic, and yet it's an everyday car, but it looks great, they drive great, and it's got a great backstory to tell. Which ones would you pick out, Sam?
I definitely agree with the Renault 5. I mean, I think that they've really picked up on what made that car so characterful and have brought it back without being too laboured about it, which is impressive. I love the fact that it's brought splashes of colour back to the roads. But what I would say is, looking at the direction of travel for the car world, one of the things that we stand to lose is, I suppose, what you might call analog cars. So 3-pedal manuals, relative low levels of electronic interference, that hands-on driving experience. So, I mean, you've already mentioned the BMW M2, which you can still get with a manual gearbox. I would argue the Toyota Yaris GR4 is an absolute nailed-on future classic, if not already. It's got things like a manual handbrake, and when you pull it, it disconnects the rear drive shaft so the car can perform a handbrake turn more easily. Now, show me the EV that does that. So, yeah, I mean, I'd say any analog car, and that might actually promote some quite humble cars to a classic status earlier than expected, simply because they're great drivers' cars. Watch this space. We'd have to work out what they are in time, but the humble non-Cooper Mini was regarded as a driver's car from the off. And, you know, there are going to be the equivalent of a basic Mini 850 out there that, you know, people won't know what they've got till it's gone. And we need to see what those cars are. But it was the last wave of analog, which is the key to this.
Good answer, Sam.
I think I would go with continuing with your EV route and be maybe slightly more controversial and say the Honda E, although it has suffered some depreciation already. I ran one for 3 months in a previous life, I guess, and it was a fantastic thing. Really, really good. And the fact that it was rear-wheel drive and you didn't have to slow down at corners, you just put the regen braking on. It was brilliant. Really, really good. And even though it had a small range, it was perfectly usable. So, and it looks really cool as well. So,
yeah, it's got to look cool.
Yeah, indeed.
Okay, we'll leave it there. Thanks for your questions. Look forward to part 2, where we'll tackle some more of them.